All right, welcome conquistadors to our first lore deep dive. So I know y'all been long awaiting me to talk about some of the questions we've had. I just did a video on this and my phone died after about 40 minutes and I realized that that was way too long, so I got what I deserved. So I'm going to be a little bit more expedient through this one because, one, I don't want to waste any more time. I've got plenty to paint and build for this. But as you all know, as some of you know, I'm long-winded. I'm going to try to continue working on that. And, well, let's go ahead and dive in. All right, first off, Inquisition and Iber, Grimm. Okay, I want to show you the location of where they're at. So, seats of power for the Inquisition. Seats of power are going to be in Brule, the Imperial Cathedral, the church, and the state. Over in Iberium, they're going to be at the capital, Iberium. Inquisition's roles right now are much more religious in nature. They're going to look more like the Spanish Inquisition of the real world, rather than what we know as, the prototypical Eisenhorn 40K variant. So Iber has a bad relationship with the Inquisition. They always have. They still do, even after the state basically imposed the Inquisition to be one of the ruling authorities in Iberium. So they're keeping them at arm's distance. Iberium is keeping the Inquisition at arm's distance. They don't trust them. Neither does the Inquisition trust Iberium. So there's a lot of witch hunts after the Agri Wars. And the Inquisition really has its own strategy and ploys going on right now. You also asked a little bit about scenic, Grimm. So going back over here to our map, Iber is just a big, huge grassland with a couple of forests here and coastal mountains, coastal forest over there. But I really drew inspiration from the Great Plains of America. You can look that up, and even a little bit of, once we get down here to the Northern Plains, is all Great Plains of North America, the United States. And down here where we go into the Great Plains on the bigger map, that's a little bit more southwestern vibe. So grassland, shrubbery. My recent works with the Battle of Wailing Heights happened outside of Freehold. Freehold has a lot of marshes, a lot of grassland down there as well. So if you're doing aesthetics and your models are from Iber, grass, lots of pretty grass. I think the contrasting elements of the Blanchitsu stuff with a beautiful backdrop is really a neat duo. Okay, Battle of Wailing Heights, symptomatic. I'll do a video on this. I don't want to turn the stuff into tutorials, but I'm more than happy to help anybody out with their hobby. I'm not the best at any one thing. I'm kind of just a jack of all trades, and mostly I get it from watching other people or asking. In this case, I talked a lot to the Little Wars. He helped me out, set up my stuff. He does beautiful mosaics and or not mosaics. I'm drawing a blank. I'm not gonna, if I can't remember something, I'm not gonna dwell on it, and I'm not gonna try to figure it out because that's what I did too much of in the last video. But check out Little War Stories. He does cool stuff, and I'll show you how I do mine offline. Basically just a big black curtain backdrop. And getting lighting and framing right is key. I'm gonna do more of those, so the next time I do one symptomatic, I'll hit you up. New World, Reliquat. Previous expeditions failure except for the Lost Company. Truckstorm on Discord, he is the owner of the Lost Company. They are a Freehold Merchant Guild element that went over there before our current setting, and they're the only confirmed entity, expeditionary force, that is known to still be over there. Well, let me rephrase. They're known to have gone over there. I don't think it's known if they're still alive or not, but that's the last contact we had with anyone from the New World. If I've got anything wrong with that, Truxton can correct me. What and as far as what's over there, well, of the peoples, we know there's some native indigenous folk over there. Whether or not there are more expeditionary forces left over there, we don't know. There are also Exodites in the Eldar fashion, but in a very Blanche way. Again, if y'all are referencing the Google document, I've put this stuff in there. And where we at? New worlds. Let's go down. Here we are. Yeah, this stuff. That's who's over there. Very low tech. That's pretty high tech for this. Maybe a seer or someone would have that type of armor. But this stuff is what I'm imagining, Ian Miller, John Blanche type stuff, right? Those are the Exodites over there. And again, there's a really easy way to ruin the immersivity of this, the immersive nature of a setting like this. And I think the easiest way to do that is by taking something and just overdoing it, running with it. So we're not going to see Eldar in the 40K variation, and we're definitely not going to see armies of them. We're not going to even see armies of Exodites over there. They're small tribes. They're small, spread out pockets of this. That's with everything in this entire Salvatore setting, right? Be prudent. Don't make armies of this stuff because they're just small war bands. There's areas for armies, and that's in the Agri Wars. We'll talk about that here a little bit later. Just one last thing, New World maps. I'm planning on making some as we get over there. There's been some, in our Mortarham campaigns, we actually have some physical text that we recovered from a ship's logs that have given us details. We just haven't had a chance to flesh that out. Truckstorm and I we'll give you all some cool little Easter eggs, I think, with that, and make some maps to show where we're going to go explore. But besides that, I'm largely going to be exploring this area with y'all. This is kind of my sandbox as well, my area where I can enjoy and explore, and I don't know what's all over there yet. So let's make it what we want. I will say I don't want to get too far off the deep end. We'll talk a little bit later about what factions are here and what factions are not. Mutants in society, reliquats symptomatic. Mutants in society, Ibber, very accepting of mutants, psychers, witches, all the types, the variations, ogres and giants, so on and so forth. Polis is not, although they'll harness anything that will get them ahead in the game. So that's why you'll see some mutants with them. Merchant guilds are also kind of the same, in the same lines of both factions, whereas they're more accepting that these things are... Merchant guilds deal with mutants all the time in trade and in management. So they're definitely used to them. Don't really see an issue with them, but they're going to also use them to their benefit, right? How are they around? How are they made? There's so many ways we could answer that. Obviously with ogres, that's just something that's already in the setting, but these more fantasy type elements, I kind of like leaving those open-ended. I don't think we need an answer for everything. Everything in this doesn't have to be scientific. That's one of the great plot pivot points of being caught in a warp storm, is sometimes stuff it's there for whatever reason and we don't know, and we're past the point of trying to figure out why. I think this world is so caught up in surviving that they don't really know how the beastmen or the mutants or the Tors or the psychers or witches became prevalent. They're just using them to their benefit, right? But how they're made, well, if you're getting into the made scenarios, the gene enhancements, there's a lot of good Horus Heresy novels and 40K novels out there that talk about gene modification. I think we still retain a pretty decent capability as far as making mutants or enhancing on mutants and gene bred type folk. Yeah. So, all right, let's go. I'm getting off topic here. I'm getting off track. Let's go back over here. Squats, Jam Jar, a little bit of the same. Iber, very accepting of them. Polis, pretty understanding that it's a human variation, so they're okay with them. They're not going to prosecute them unless they're doing weird stuff. Merchant guilds, I think the merchant guilds are made up of a large squat community, especially Tagebo. Tagebo is the seat for the slave trade, and I think the squats are at least part of the power behind that. So Iber is used to squats and has a pretty decent population of them existing within Iberium. And I got to reference these maps to really seat in where I'm showing you all this stuff. So let me get to that. Guys, I'm going to try to get better at being more professional with these presentations. It takes a lot doing all this, so be patient with me. I've tried putting a slideshow in Google, but they don't really support that very much anymore. So if there's any tech guys, tech people out there, let me know. I'm all for insights on how to do this. So Tagebo, Merchant Guilds, that's where your squats are from. I think they have a big influence there. Probably some of the rulers of Tagebo are squats. Freehold definitely has its fair share of squats. Squats, I think all the typical GW tropes and characteristics are cool and should be implemented here, you know, as far as them being artisans and forgers and miners and tradesmen. That's all just, you know, self-imposed here, right? So easily transferable and fun, I think. Moons, Jam Jar again. This is a big topic I want to talk about. So lots of them. We're in the dozens of moons. I don't think the people of Nimbus actually know how many moons are out there. They can be powerful. Some of them are powerful. They are actively being drawn on energy-wise, especially Iberium with their more witchy, more psychic natures, talents. They're going to be drawing powers from the moons. You're going to see a lot of moon icons and iconography. Is that the word? Yeah. Within my Iberium builds and elements, right? Polis, not so much. Polis is not really a super huge fan of the moons. They know they mean something. They know they have power. But they're more so of the imperial mindset of, you know, we draw our power from the emperor. We draw our power from faith. And the moons don't really play into that for them, so they're not as big fans. And I think they probably would prosecute some people for moon worship, which brings me to moon cults. Moon cults right here. Iber, got a lot of moon cults in Iber, and then I think up here in the northwest, up in the Old Wood, you've probably got a lot of moon cults. Reliquat just posted something on Instagram. I'm excited to see that. Okay, so we got, all right, this is a new concept I've been recently exploring. So no sun, only moonlight. And this kind of draws from my recent endeavors into making little productions I'm just going to post some images in the background for your viewing pleasure while I talk about this. So I think a cool concept is that being caught in the warp storm, as we are, the solar system's natural sun is probably hidden. And so how are we going to get light on the planet? Well, I think that's an easy excuse for us to say, well, the moons provide it, right? There's all sorts of celestial bodies orbiting other planets that, you know, are energy sources, molten crags that, you know, they're living planets in most essences that are orbiting parental bodies, right? So I think if, you know, again, I'm not getting into a scientific territory. I don't have to explain every single thing. So if you're wondering how we grow crops or how vegetation grows through photosynthesis, I don't think we have to explain any of that per se. That's getting too far into the weeds, too in depth. But The cool thing about having moons providing light is that we can set tones and moods and themes and stories by what moon is orbiting the night sky at the moment. And maybe it's multiple at once, and those are all drawing some kind of energy. They're permeating some type of energy, whether it be, you know, dark or light or colorful or not. So in my last group of posts, I did state that the Moon Lefay is what was shining over the night sky during the Battle of Whaling Heights. So I have thoughts of making different filters on my light setup and taking pictures of those. So I think it adds some cool elements there. So let's see, colors, all different types of colors. Keeping with that muted Blanche Ink 28 vibe, you know. It might be cool to see some pinks or blues or whatever. Moonfolk, it's a cool concept. Talked to a couple people about that. So interesting thing to note is that there is no way off of Nimbus. We've lost space travel. We cannot get into orbit. Yes, we have big floating flying aircraft, big cumbersome ships, but those cannot take us into space. Although there's been talks about such things as omens, prophetic peoples being on the moons, acting as ferrymen, ferry people, like ferry boats taking you to and from Nimbus. I think that works going in. I don't think they can take you out. I think only very, very, very powerful individuals on the outside can maybe get through that warp storm and get onto Nimbus. Now, if you're going to do that, talk to me about it, please. Yeah, conversation is to be had about if anybody is coming from the outside realm onto Nimbus. That being said, Lunax, yes, his Grey Knights are sitting outside the warp storm, catching glimpses of what's going on in the Salvatore setting. So more on that later when we talk about Space Marines. Moon cults, we talked about that. Oh, Ferris. Yeah, Ferris. So let's go to Ferris. The Freehold Manifest was a little document we made, kind of going over our Mordheim campaign and showing a newspaper type editorial, just detailing what had happened in our campaign. But the reason I bring it up is that's Ferris right there. That's the moon that was hit by a meteor coming through the warp storm and intercepting the orbit of Ferris and breaking it up. And that's what's raining down moonstone, warpstone onto the planet, which we're using as a power source. You can go read about it there. And then I shared this into the Freehold channel on the Discord group because it is the Freehold Manifest. And there's some cool stuff in there you can reference on of what we were doing locally and with Salvatore. All right, I think we're on to our next one. Yeah, okay. Agri Wars, Pivoli. So I made the Agri Wars as a thought, kind of a nod to World War I and the 30 Years' War. World War I being not just because aesthetically we've talked about trench warfare and whatnot, but kind of the geographic nature of the 30 Years' War is implied into this. And then the time period between World War I and World War II is where the current setting for Salvatore is. So if you're using, building, engaging in the current setting, think of this during our own timeline of the 1920s and 1930s in between World War I and World War II. We're in a period of rebuilding, an arms race, and kind of political instability going on, a world-changing time, at least for this continent here. 30 Years' War reference, the Tech Guild Mountains. This is a big, I took influence from the Alps from the German valleys within the Alps, the Bavarian landscape. That's what this is. And even though this is a big radiated wasteland now within these mountains, some of the outlying forest and areas still remain intact. They're not super radiated and Mad Max style, if you will. But that in there definitely is. And to get across that, you're going to be exposed to those elements, right? But the Agri Wars was fought mainly around this area. Let me see if I can get my cursor in here. So up here in Regenburg, obviously some proxy wars were fought in there just because of the nature of Regenburg not wanting to be subsumed by the state. But Agri Wars maybe fought a little bit on this coastline. And then up here in what I'm calling the river valleys, this is where the tributaries from this great river that runs through basically the border between Iber and what nations were here before the Agri Wars. This is where the majority of that conflict were fought. And then eventually, you know, crossing this river, getting down into Berdino and over to Iberium's, the capital's doorsteps. I also think there were some conflicts, and there was a smaller theater of war that kind of grew there towards the end down here, because the state naturally probably would have tried to send some forces through the mountains to get to ruin the military training academy of Iber to shut it down. So, all right. So, aesthetically, lots of human elements in this. Pike, trench warfare. I want to re-enhance on this is a pike and shot type setting. I always love seeing more pikes, more pikes, more pikes. Less tech, more pikes. Trench warfare, somebody brought this up a while back, and I think this is cool. I know some other settings are doing this too. I think we're not going to be able to stay out of aesthetics because of the nature of miniatures. Just there's only so many miniature kits we can draw from. There's only so many themes and inspirational settings. So I definitely dig trench warfare, especially when you get to the Riverlands and you get into that standoffish nature of this with how many, the population that we have. Witch use became much more prevalent towards the end of the war. The Black Swan was created during the Agri War. If you haven't seen that piece, go check out my Instagram. It's got a whole story on it, and how Grand Inquisitor Guy, I call her Toledo in the last one. That was a mistake on my part. Inquisitor Guy, she basically conjured, had a seance and drew this demon, which she thought she was raising in the Emperor's name to fight for Iberium during the Agri Wars. So she actually drew a demon from a homegrown chaos god, minor chaos god called Delorum. Anyways, that type of stuff was happening towards the end, which is directly tied to the results and the Reformation. I think once the state won the Agri Wars, they immediately had the Imperial Cathedral and the church have a big, massive Reformation to say no more psychers, no more witches. That stuff's outlawed. So a big witch hunt happened after the Agri Wars, and Iber was at a loss to stop it. We had a loss of feudal power. So the feudal kingdoms basically got their seats of power ripped out from under them and had some proxy governments put in place by the state. And that's kind of what is pseudo-ruling the Kingdom of Iber. And all the Riverlands are no longer nations. They're under the Holy Empire of Polis now, ruled by their means and their laws, right? Okay, where are we at? Vlindenheim. Let's go to Vlindenheim. Where are we at? I need the state. There we are. Vlindenheim, up here. So, Dracula's lair, Batman's lair, right? So, first off, resource capabilities. I don't think there's a lot of resources up there in Vlindenheim. I think that's interesting because they have a lot of money. They're very wealthy. The state knows this. They think maybe it's just through, elusive trade and maybe some whaling. This is a big front for vampires, I think. And The only reason they weren't subsumed or there hasn't been inquisitions into Wittenheim is because they're big supporters of the state, or at least to the extent that it keeps the Inquisition out of there. The representatives from Wittenheim, I think, are probably vampiric in nature. And then if you want some, I pulled up some of Ian Miller's artwork. This, to me, represents Wittenheim. To note, windmills. Windmills are going to be a thing in this setting. I've already got a couple models primed. I've been collecting some stuff. There's not a lot of agriculture up in the state. So again, that to me screams, well, you might be growing a little something, but it's kind of just a front because, you know, these people are actively eating people, you know, sucking blood in there. So another great inspirational piece. I think Wittenheim is going to be a big castle, a big fortress type structure. Stuff like this. Ian Miller nails it with every piece he's ever done. So, let's see. Let me get back to my notes here. So, yeah, it's kind of a province of the state. They provide resources and fighting capabilities. I don't have a whole lot of inspiration for aesthetics as far as this goes, but old world stuff, that real Baroque, you know, Salvatore